The galaxy had known many wars, but none started like this. Without warning, alien fleets tore through human colonies. The night sky above dozens of worlds burned as fire from orbit rained down. People screamed, soldiers fought, and entire cities turned into ashen hours. Humanity had always been seen as weak outsiders by the great empires. Now, those empires wanted them erased. Yet even in the darkest moment, a few still stood and fought back. Among them was a young human warrior named Kale, who refused to run. When the stars themselves seemed to fall, Kale's ship was one of the last, defending the colony of Orion Prime. The air was filled with the roar of engines and the crack of weapons fire. Explosions shook the ground as alien soldiers in shining armor broke through the city walls. Kale carried only a rifle and a blade strapped to his back. He was bloodied, tired, but unbroken. Every step he took was a promise that humanity would not bow. He fought not for glory, but for survival. His eyes hard as steel as he pushed through the ruins. Amid the battle, Kale noticed something strange. Not far from him, a group of alien soldiers guarded a figure dressed not in armor, but in royal white. She stood tall even as chaos raged, her silver hair gleaming under the burning sky. Her glowing tattoos marked her as someone important. She was not a soldier, she was a leader, maybe even a princess of their empire. Kale's orders were simple: eliminate any alien target. But something inside him froze. Killing her would change nothing. Instead, he felt a sharp pull deep in his chest, an instinct he could not explain. The alien spotted Kale and opened fire. He dove for cover, dirt spraying around him as beams scorched the ground. He moved quickly, rifle barking in his hands, cutting down the guards one by one. His blade flashed when the ammo ran dry, slicing through alien armor with raw human fury. Soon, only the royal woman remained, staring at him with wide, glowing eyes. She expected death. Instead, Kale lowered his weapon. "Run," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. She blinked, confused. No human had ever spared her kind, but Kale was not like the others. Something about her eyes, bright with fire yet filled with fear, made him pause. She was not just an enemy, she was alive, cornered, and vulnerable. His heart, hardened by war, cracked for the first time. Before she could answer, another explosion shook the ground, collapsing the ruins around them. The roof gave way, and both fell into the darkness below. They landed in the ruins of an underground chamber. Dust choked the air, and faint light flickered from broken panels. Kale groaned, pushing himself up despite his wounds. The alien woman lay close by, stunned but alive. He limped to her side, offering a hand. She stared at it as if it were poison, then finally, slowly, placed her own into his. Her skin was warm, her grip trembling, yet she held on. Why spare me?" she whispered, her voice carrying a melody that did not belong to humans. Kale's jaw tightened. "Because I'm not like them. I fight soldiers, not prisoners." For the first time, the alien royal looked at a human not with hatred, but with something else: confusion, curiosity, perhaps even the smallest seed of trust. She studied him, the cuts across his face, the fire in his eyes. He was nothing like she had been taught. She had been told humans were savages, little more than beasts. But the man before her had risked his life not to kill, but to protect. Footsteps echoed above. More alien troops were searching. Kale grabbed her arm and pulled her deeper into the shadows. She resisted at first, pride burning in her chest, but soon realized that without him, she would be found and executed by her own kind for failing. Reluctantly, she followed. They moved through tunnels filled with echoes of the war above. The woman's glowing tattoos lit their way in the dark. Kale noticed how the light danced across her face, highlighting sharp cheekbones and fierce eyes. She carried herself like someone used to command, even though fear edged her steps. He said nothing, but deep down he knew. This war had just changed. As they reached an abandoned bunker, Cale finally allowed himself to breathe. He pressed against the wall, his chest heaving. The woman stood across from him, her gaze sharp as a blade. "You are either the bravest or the most foolish human alive," she said quietly. "Do you know who I am?" Cale shook his head. "Don't care. You're alive. That's enough." She studied him in silence, then turned her eyes away, her thoughts racing. No one had ever dared to defy the Empire. No one had ever looked at her as just a person, not a symbol. This human had done both. She did not yet understand why he spared her, but in her heart, something long hidden stirred. Above them, the battle raged on. The galaxy was burning, yet here in the ruins, two enemies stood side by side. Neither trusted the other fully. Neither understood the bond that had just begun. But fate had tied them together, and in that bond lay a hope no one could see yet. For in that war-torn chamber, a human warrior had won more than just a battle. He had won the first spark of an alien's heart, and with it, the fragile chance to change the galaxy forever. The ruins above still shook from the war. Dust drifted down like ash, and the sounds of weapons fire echoed through the broken city. Cale sat against the cold metal wall of the bunker, his rifle laid across his lap. His breathing was heavy, his wounds deep, but his eyes stayed sharp. Across from him, the alien woman stood tall despite the chaos. Her glowing tattoos pulsed softly, marking her not as a common soldier, but as someone with great importance. A long while they said nothing. The silence was heavy, filled only by the faint hum of broken machines. Finally Cale spoke. "You should rest. The fighting won't stop soon." The alien woman tilted her head, her silver hair catching the dim light. "Do you not understand what you've done, human? By sparing me, you have made yourself a traitor to your kind and a target for mine." Cale smirked faintly though. There was no joy in it. "I've been a target since the war began. One more enemy doesn't matter." She studied him, her expression unreadable. Her people called humans reckless, short-lived, and weak. Yet here was one bleeding out, still, speaking with calm resolve. Something about him unsettled her. "I am Serenia," she said finally, her voice carrying the weight of command. "Daughter of the High Throne." Cale raised an eyebrow but showed no surprise. "Then I guess that makes you a princess." "Doesn't change anything. You're still alive because I chose it." Serenia frowned, unused to such bluntness. Back in her empire, every word spoken to her was coded in respect or fear. But this human didn't bow, didn't tremble. He simply met her eyes as an equal. It was both infuriating and strangely refreshing. Before either could say more, a sound cut through the bunker. Boots striking metal, voices speaking in Serenia's language. Soldiers. Cale's muscles tensed instantly. He lifted his rifle, motioning for her to stay quiet. The footsteps drew closer. Shadows moved beyond the broken doorway. Cale held his breath, finger steady on the trigger, but then Serenia moved. She stepped in front of him, her glowing markings brighter in the darkness. "Wait," she whispered. "If they see you first, they'll kill you, but if they see me..." Her words trailed off, but Cale understood. She was offering to shield him. For a second, he almost laughed. Hours ago, he was her sworn enemy. Now she was willing to risk her life. The soldiers entered, armored and armed, their weapons raised. When they saw Serenia, they froze. "Your Highness!" One shouted. "We thought you were lost." Serenia kept her composure, though her heart raced. "I survived. The enemy was destroyed. Leave me now. I must complete my task." The soldiers hesitated, their gazes flicking toward the shadows where Cale hid. Serenia's voice hardened. "Go," reluctantly. They obeyed, retreating back into the ruins above. When the last echo of their boots faded, Kale stepped out from hiding. He looked at her with quiet disbelief. "You just lied to save me." Serenia crossed her arms, trying to mask her own confusion. "Do not mistake this for kindness. I need you alive. You know these tunnels. Without you, I may never escape this battlefield." Kale almost smiled. "Sure, let's call it that." They moved together through the ruins, Kale leading the way, Serenia following with sharp eyes. Every corridor was filled with danger-collapsed beams, pools of fire, and the echo of soldiers hunting. More than once, Kale pulled Serenia back just before a patrol passed. More than once, Serenia guided him with her knowledge of hidden passages. Step by step, the fragile alliance grew. Hours later, they found a hidden chamber deep beneath the city. Inside were supplies left by retreating soldiers. Kale collapsed onto a crate, exhaustion pulling at his body. Serenia, still composed, began to examine his wounds. "You're bleeding too much," she said, kneeling beside him. Kale waved her off. "I've had worse," but Serenia ignored him. Her fingers glowed faintly as she pressed them over his injuries. Kale stiffened at the warmth spreading through his skin. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Healing," she replied softly. "Not enough to mend you fully, but enough to keep you walking." For the first time, Kale allowed himself to really look at her. Her face was calm, focused, but her eyes betrayed something deeper. She wasn't healing him out of duty. Something inside her wanted to. "You don't have to," he said quietly. Serenia's hands paused for a heartbeat, then continued. "No, but I will." The silence that followed was different now. Not heavy, not hostile. It was filled with something unspoken, something fragile but real. When Kale finally closed his eyes, drifting toward rest, Serenia remained awake. She looked at him, this stubborn human who should have killed her but didn't. This warrior who treated her not as royalty, not as an enemy, but as a person. She had been raised to see humans as weak and expendable. But Kale was changing that belief with every breath he took. And though she did not want to admit it, her heart was stirring in ways she had never known. Above them, the war raged on. Armies clashed, empires burned, and the galaxy edged closer to ruin. Yet in the darkness of that chamber, a bond was beginning to form. It was not trust, not yet. But it was something stronger than hatred. Something that could grow into hope. And perhaps, Serenia thought, that hope might one day change everything. The tunnels grew quieter the deeper they walked. The sound of battle above faded into dull echoes, leaving only the drip of water and the rasp of Kale's breathing. His body ached, but each step he forced himself forward. Serenia walked close beside him, her glowing tattoos casting soft light against the stone. She kept her head high, yet every so often her eyes flicked toward him, watching, studying. Kale noticed but said nothing. He had no energy for words. Yet part of him wondered why she still followed. She could have fled hours ago, found her soldiers again, and left him behind. Instead, she stayed. Finally, Kale stopped, leaning against the cold wall. His chest rose and fell heavily. Serenia stepped forward, her voice low but steady. "You cannot continue like this. Your wounds slow you down." Kale gave a short laugh that carried no humor. "War doesn't wait for the wounded. We move or we die." Serenia frowned. "You carry pain like it is nothing. Is this what makes humans dangerous? Your refusal to yield?" Kale met her gaze. His eyes, though tired, still held fire. "It's what makes us survive." The words struck her deeper than she expected. She had been told humans were reckless creatures, surviving only by luck. But this man spoke with quiet certainty, as if endurance itself was part of his blood. They pressed on until they reached a cavern opening into a vast underground lake. The ceiling glimmered with strange crystals, casting light across the water. For a moment, the war above felt distant, like a nightmare slipping away. Kale sank to the ground near the water's edge, dipping his hands to drink. Serenia remained standing, scanning the cavern. Her warrior's instinct told her they were not safe. But her eyes kept drifting back to him. "Why did you really spare me?" she asked suddenly. Kale looked up, water dripping from his chin. He thought for a long moment before answering. "Because I saw fear in your eyes. Not the kind of fear soldiers have in battle, but the kind you feel when you're about to lose yourself. No one deserves that." Serenia's chest tightened. No one had ever spoken to her like that. In her empire, weakness was punished, fear was hidden. Yet this human, an enemy drenched in blood and fire, had seen her as something more. "You confuse me," she admitted softly. "You fight like a beast, yet you speak like a man who values life more than victory." Kale gave a tired smile. "Maybe that's what your people never understood. We fight hardest because we know how fragile life is." Silence fell between them, but it was no longer heavy. It was a silence that carried weight, a silence of two minds beginning to understand each other. After a while, Serenia knelt beside him. Her hand glowed faintly as she touched his shoulder, healing another wound. Kale flinched at the warmth, but did not pull away. Her touch was gentle, her face calm. For the first time, trust flickered between them, fragile but real. Hours passed in the cavern. They shared little food from a broken supply kit. Kale told her stories of Earth, of wide oceans, green forests, and skies filled with stars. Serenia listened in silence, her heart strangely moved. She had traveled across half the galaxy, yet the way he described his home sounded more alive than any world she had known. When he spoke of his people, his eyes softened. She realized then that his strength came not from orders or duty, but from love for family, for home, for survival. It was something she had never seen in her empire, where power was prized above all. As he rested, Serenia found herself watching him more closely. His scars told stories of battles survived. His hands were rough from work and war. Yet when he smiled faintly in his sleep, he looked almost peaceful. Her chest ached with something unfamiliar. Was it admiration, gratitude, or something deeper? Something she dared not name? She turned her eyes away, unsettled. She was royalty, born to rule, never to feel this for an enemy. And yet, her thoughts were broken by a sudden noise. From the far end of the cavern, shadows moved. A patrol of alien soldiers entered, their weapons glowing. Kale stirred awake instantly, grabbing his rifle. Serenia rose, her heart pounding. The soldiers spotted them. "Your Highness," one shouted in their tongue. "You are alive." Their eyes turned to Kale, and rage filled their faces. "The human! Kill him!" Before Kale could move, Serenia stepped forward. Her voice rang with command. "No! He is under my protection." The soldiers froze, shocked. "But he's the enemy." Serenia's eyes blazed. "He saved my life. He remains alive because I will it. Disobey me, and you defy the throne." The soldiers exchanged uneasy glances, then lowered their weapons reluctantly. Kale's grip on his rifle loosened slightly, though his eyes stayed wary. When the soldiers withdrew, Serenia turned back to him. Kale studied her, his expression unreadable. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly. Her gaze held his. "Yes, I did." In that moment, neither spoke further. But both knew something had shifted. Trust was no longer just a fragile thread, it was becoming a bond, stronger than either expected. Above them, the galaxy burned. Armies marched, fleets clashed, and millions cried out in fear. But here, in the depths of a ruined world, a human and an alien princess began to see each other not as enemies, not as strangers, but as something far more dangerous to the war hope. The surface was burning. When Kale and Serenia finally climbed, from the underground tunnels they saw the city of Orion Prime in ruins. Fires spread across shattered towers. The sky glowed red from the engines of alien warships. The cries of survivors were drowned out by the thunder of battle. Kale clenched his fists, anger carving deep lines across his face. Serenia stood beside him, her silver hair dancing in the smoky wind. Her eyes clouded with something between sorrow and guilt. "This was your people's doing," Kale said grimly. She flinched at his words, but did not deny them. "Not mine," she whispered. "My father's." For a moment, Kale looked at her in silence. He wanted to hate her. She was the daughter of the very ruler who had ordered this destruction. Yet when he looked into her eyes, he saw not a princess of the enemy, but a woman weighed down by shame. Against his will, his anger softened. They made their way through the broken streets. Kale moved carefully, watching for patrols. Serenia walked close, her royal bearing now hidden beneath ash and dirt. More than once, Kale pulled her into shadows as alien soldiers passed by. And each time, Serenia felt the strength in his hand, steady and protective. But soon, danger came not from the enemy, but from allies. As they crossed into the ruins of the human district, a group of resistance fighters surrounded them. Their weapons rose instantly at the sight of Serenia. "A royal," one shouted. "Kill her before she calls her fleet." Kale stepped forward, rifle raised, his body a shield in front of Serenia. "No, she's with me." The fighters stared in shock. "With you? Have you lost your mind, soldier? She's the reason our families are dead." Kale's voice was hard as steel. "She saved my life, and I saved hers. You'll have to shoot through me first." The standoff grew tense. Serenia's heart raced. She had faced assassins and generals before, but never this. Never the hatred of those who had lost everything. She expected Kale to falter, but he did not. He stood unyielding, his rifle steady, his eyes daring them to fire. Finally, the resistance leader lowered his weapon. "You've changed, Kale. Maybe too much. But if she betrays us, her blood is on your hands." The fighters left, their glares sharp as blades. Kale lowered his rifle slowly, turning back to Serenia. "You see," he said quietly. "Even my own don't trust you, and your people want me dead. We're caught between both sides." Serenia met his gaze, her chest heavy with conflict. "Then perhaps, all we have is each other." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Her cheeks warmed, though she tried to hide it. Kale said nothing, but something in his eyes shifted. Softer than before, they continued on, moving toward the outskirts where survivors gathered. Yet whispers followed them. Humans looked at Serenia with hatred. Aliens hunted Kale as a traitor. Every step together was a battle against suspicion. That night, they found shelter in a half-collapsed temple. The stone walls glowed faintly with alien carvings, symbols of an older time. Serenia sat by the broken altar, her hand tracing the patterns. Kale tended the fire, his face lit by flickering light. "You risked yourself today," Serenia said softly. "Against your own people." Kale did not look up. "I've risked myself every day since this war began. The difference is, now I'm risking it for something that might matter." Her eyes lingered on him, searching his face. "You should hate me." Kale finally met her gaze. "Maybe I should. But I don't." They continued on, moving toward the outskirts where survivors gathered. Yet whispers followed them. Humans looked at Serenia with hatred. Aliens hunted Kale as a traitor. Every step together was a battle against suspicion. That night, they found shelter in a half-collapsed temple. The stone walls glowed faintly with alien carvings, symbols of an older time. Serenia sat by the broken altar, her hand tracing the patterns. Kale tended the fire, his face lit by flickering light. "You risked yourself today," Serenia said softly. "Against your own people." Kale did not look up. "I've risked myself every day since this war began. The difference is, now I'm risking it for something that might matter." Her eyes lingered on him, searching his face. You should hate me. Kale finally met her gaze. Maybe I should, but I don't. The silence stretched. Serenya's heart pounded against her chest. She had been raised in a palace where emotions were weaknesses, where loyalty was to the throne, not the heart. Yet here she was, sitting in ruins beside a human who spoke to her not as a princess, not as an enemy, but as someone worth saving. Before she could speak, a shadow fell across the temple doorway. Soldiers in alien armor stepped inside, their weapons drawn. Serenya rose instantly, her voice sharp. "Stand down, I command you." But the captain sneered. "We serve your father, not you. And your father has ordered the human's death, and yours, for siding with him." Kale raised his rifle. Serenya stepped beside him, her glowing tattoos burning brighter, her voice steady despite the fear inside. "Then it seems," she said, "that the war has already chosen our path." Kale gave a grim smile. So be it. Together, they stood shoulder to shoulder as the soldiers advanced, enemies once divided now united by betrayal. The firelight flickered across their faces, casting them not as rivals, but as warriors bound by a fragile yet unbreakable trust. In that broken temple, Kale and Serenya realized the truth. The enemy was not just out there among the ruins. The enemy was everywhere, within human hearts, within alien orders, within the very war itself. And if they were to survive, if they were to give the galaxy even a spark of hope, they would have to stand together against all of it. The temple was silent after the last soldier fell. Smoke curled from Kale's rifle as he lowered it, his chest heaving. Serenya stood beside him, her hands glowing faintly from the energy she had unleashed. For the first time, they had fought together, not as enemies, but as allies bound by necessity. Kale wiped blood from his cheek and gave her a look that was half a smile, half disbelief. Didn't think royalty knew how to fight. Serenya straightened, her silver hair tangled, her eyes still fierce. "I was taught to lead armies, not hide behind them." Their gazes held longer than either expected. The bond that had been growing in silence now burned openly, undeniable. Something had changed, but outside, the world still burned. The war was tightening its grip across the planet. Alien fleets closed in from orbit, while human resistance forces fractured under despair. Kale and Serenya both knew the truth. Neither side could win alone. Yet both sides hated each other too much to stand together. That night, Kale sat near the temple fire, staring into the flames. Serenya sat across from him, silent for a long time before finally speaking. "My people will not forgive me for siding with you," she said quietly, "and yours will never trust me. But perhaps that does not matter." Kale looked up, his tired eyes sharp. "What does matter then?" She hesitated, her voice soft but certain. "That we survive. That's something. Survives beyond hate." Kale studied her, the firelight painting her face with gold. He had seen her at her most vulnerable, at her most defiant, at her most dangerous. Yet now he saw her as she truly was, not just a princess, not just an enemy, but someone who carried the same burden he did. Slowly he reached across the fire, his hand open. For a heartbeat, Serenya froze. Then, with trembling fingers, she placed her hand into his. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The warmth between their hands said enough. In that silent moment, Serenya felt something break inside her, a wall she had built since childhood. She had been taught that love was weakness, that bonds made rulers fragile. Yet sitting there with Kale, she felt not weakness, but strength. A strength that came not from fear, but from trust. The next morning, they left the temple. Word of their survival had already spread. Soldiers, both human and alien, had heard rumors. Whispers of a princess walking beside a human warrior. Some called it betrayal. Others called it madness. But a few called it hope. When they reached a hidden camp of survivors, Kale expected anger. Instead, he saw eyes filled with something else: curiosity. Men and women who had lost everything stared at Serenia, not as a monster, but as proof that maybe the galaxy was not as divided as it seemed. One old fighter stepped forward, his hands shaking. "If an alien royal walks with a human," he said slowly, "then maybe we are not finished yet." The words spread like fire through the camp. Doubt turned to whispers, whispers to murmurs, murmurs to shouts. For the first time in weeks, hope flickered in tired eyes. Serenia felt their gazes on her, heavy and searching. She turned to Kale, her voice low. "They will not follow me. I am still their enemy." Kale shook his head. "No, they won't follow you. They'll follow us." And so they did. In the days that followed, more survivors joined. Human soldiers, refugees, even defectors from Serenia's army. They gathered not because of orders, not because of fear, but because of the bond they saw between a human warrior and an alien. Princes, a bond that defied the war itself. At night, Kale and Serenia stood together, looking out over the growing camp. Fires burned, but for once, they were not fires of destruction. They were fires of life. Serenia spoke softly, her eyes on the stars. "All my life, I was told to rule with strength, never with the heart. But now, I wonder if the heart was always the greater strength." Kale looked at her, his voice steady. "Then let's prove it." She turned to him, their faces close. In the quiet night, her hand brushed his, then held it. Their eyes met, and without words they understood. The love that had been born in ruins was no longer a secret. It was their strength, their weapon, their banner. And as the camp grew, as whispers turned into a movement, Kale and Serenia realized the truth. They were no longer just survivors. They were no longer just enemies forced into alliance. Together, they had become something greater. A human and an alien united not by war, but by love. And that love carried the power to rally the broken, to stand against empires, and perhaps even to save the galaxy itself. The galaxy was on the edge of collapse. Alien fleets tightened their grip on the skies, and human resistance shattered world by world. Yet in the ashes of Arian Prime, a spark had formed. Kale and Serenia's bond had spread beyond whispers, becoming a symbol. More survivors gathered every day, drawn not by orders or flags, but by the sight of a human warrior and an alien princess standing together. Their camp became an army. Weapons were scarce, supplies thin, but hope burned where despair had ruled. Soldiers who had once fought each other now trained side by side. For the first time, human rifles and alien blades were raised against the same enemy, but hope alone could not win a war. The Empire, Serenia's own people, moved to crush them before the alliance could grow. Word came of a fleet descending, led by none other than Serenia's father, the High Throne himself. The man who had ordered humanity's destruction. The man who now called Serenia traitor. The camp was filled with fear when the news arrived. Kale stood before the crowd, his voice steady, his armor scarred but unbroken. "We cannot match their power," he said, "but we can show the galaxy that we will not bow. If we fall today, we fall as one." The words lit fire in weary hearts. Serenia stepped beside him, her glowing tattoos burning brighter than ever. "I was born to rule," she declared, her voice carrying across the camp. "But today, I choose to fight. Not for a throne, not for an empire, but for all who wish to live free." The cheers that followed shook the ruins. For the first time, two enemies spoke as one, and the galaxy listened. The final battle began at dawn. Alien warships darkened the skies, their weapons raining fire. Kale led the charge on the ground, his blade flashing, his rifle thunderous. Serenia fought at his side, her hands glowing with deadly light. Human fighters and alien defectors fought shoulder to shoulder, their cries of defiance rising above the roar of war. The Empire's forces pressed hard, but the alliance held. Kale moved like a storm, striking down foes twice his size. Serenia commanded with fire in her eyes, her voice carrying strength into every heart that heard it. Wherever they stood together, the enemy faltered, yet the High Throne himself descended onto the battlefield. Clad in golden armor, his presence filled the air with fear. His soldiers rallied around him, pressing forward with renewed fury. "Daughter!" His voice boomed. "You shame your blood. Step aside or die with this creature you call ally." Serenia's heart pounded, but she did not falter. She stood tall beside Kale. "I will never bow to hate. This human has shown me strength greater than your throne strength, born of trust, not fear." Kale raised his blade, his eyes locked on the towering figure. "If you want her," he growled, "you'll have to go through me." The duel that followed was brutal. The High Throne's strikes were heavy, each blow shaking the ground. Kale blocked, countered, endured, his body bleeding but his will unbroken. Serenia fought beside him, her light clashing against her father's darkness. Together, they stood against power that should have crushed them. At last, Kale found his opening. With a roar, he drove his blade into the High Throne's chest. The golden armor cracked, the Emperor's power failing. He fell to his knees, eyes wide with disbelief. Serenia stepped forward, her voice steady but filled with sorrow. "The throne dies with you, father. The galaxy will live without chains." With that, the battle ended. The Empire's forces broke, fleeing into the skies. The survivors of both species stood in stunned silence, then raised their voices in victory. For the first time, humans and aliens cheered together. In the days that followed, a fragile peace began to form. The alliance born of one warrior and one princess spread across worlds. No longer enemies, they became leaders of a new hope. On the ruins of Orion Prime, Kale and Serenia stood side by side, looking up at the stars. The galaxy was scarred, but alive. Serenia's hand found Kale's. "You have won more than my life," she said softly. "You have won my heart." Kale's tired smile carried both warmth and strength. "And with it, we've given the galaxy something worth fighting for." Their hands tightened together as the sun rose over the ruins. Not enemies, not strangers, but partners, lovers, and leaders of a new dawn. The human who had spared an alien's life had not only won her love, he had given the galaxy its last and greatest hope.